More states start to loosen COVID restrictions. Stocks have their best day since last summer. And why isn't anyone watching live television anymore? Tuesday, Need to Know? Let's go. Good morning, this is Cheddar's Need to Know podcast for March 2nd. I'm Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Good morning, Carlo.
Good morning, Wags. Do we have time for a quick pregnancy update?
Always, yes. Tell us everything.
Well, no, nothing worrisome or anything, but there's definitely a baby in that belly. It's moving. We're starting to feel the first little jabs, and we're playing some music. I think because we had read that that's one of the things you're supposed to do is put a speaker next to the belly, and sure enough, we were playing that Olivia Rodrigo song, and right when the bridge hits, here I'm going to play it if you can hear it.
Yeah.
That little fetus started moving her little arms or legs or whatever. It's amazing. It's I guess she knows a hit when she hears one, right?
There's a person in there. It's happening.
It's
I feel like you're already in love. It's so nice to see.
It's crazy. It really is.
All right, let's get to some news, Carlo. We'll have to talk later about baby stuff because I could. It's
We're here for the news.
It's life changing, and now you get it, right? Like you're probably already obsessed with this child who's not even here yet. Okay, let's talk a little vaccinations. The pace of vaccinations in the U.S. continues to accelerate up to about 1.8 million doses a day. That is likely to keep rising as the first Johnson & Johnson doses arrive in some states today. So today, people could be getting the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Florida, Ohio, and New York City expanding vaccine eligibility this week. More states and cities are lifting restrictions as well. Restaurants in Massachusetts can now open without capacity limits. Chicago public schools reopen for all K-5 students. And California has a deal to encourage school reopenings by the end of the month.
Experts have noted that testing has really taken a plunge, which could be a problem because that could make it harder to identify if a new surge comes. Right, it'll just take longer for us to realize that we're in the thick of it. The country, we're still reporting 65,000 average new cases a day and about 2,000 daily deaths. Remember, it's not over, right? That we're about at the level of the surge last summer at a national level. So there is some risk in easing these restrictions. But at the same time, it also sends the message that the vaccines are working, which is really important in terms of showing the public, why they should get vaccinated. So I sort of see both sides of this concern about going too fast.
I interviewed James Hamblin. He's a doctor who writes for The Atlantic. His work is incredible. And during this pandemic, he's been on point. He wrote an article last week saying the title was "A Quite Possibly Wonderful Summer. Families will gather, restaurants will open, people will travel. The pandemic may feel like it's behind us, even if it's not." And he just talked about, which I think we've talked about it here, just the idea of, after the 1918 flu, the Spanish flu, you had the Roaring 20s, right? We could see an epic summer. But he was even saying, we're not there yet, and it's a little troubling that we're kind of letting our hair down already, maybe a little bit too soon. At least, again, according to my personal Instagram page, which I'm again, am I the only person who's frightened of this virus and doesn't go out?
This is why I don't go on Instagram. I
can't
even deal with that.
One other note that I thought was really interesting. There's now this growing call for states to stop holding back the second dose. So Johnson & Johnson's obviously one dose, right? So it's one and done. Obviously, Pfizer and Moderna, you need two. In New York, so the state, for example, has administered less than half of its current supply in order to make sure that there's going to be vaccine available for the second dose, which is incredibly important. Some experts have said that made sense early on when the rollout was first happening because you weren't necessarily sure that the additional supply was going to come in. Dr. Ashish Jha from Brown said, and I thought that he laid out the problem well. He said, over the past week, we got 11.4 million doses into arms. 5.6 million were first, 5.8 million were second. That is a problem. Beyond debating delay of second dose, states should be using up supplies. Today, there are 21 million doses sitting on shelves. Unnecessary, unhelpful. While standout states like New Mexico use up nearly 100% of supplies, others have these large stockpiles. It makes no sense with so many millions of doses coming. So one way to get more first doses into arms, stop holding doses back. Vaccinate away. You can count on these second doses arriving because they will. So that is an interesting, should we be changing the strategy now that we know that Pfizer and Moderna have really ramped up? We're getting more of those vaccines each week than we were the week prior. So maybe just open up the floodgates and let everyone get that for at least that first shot. I don't know. It's an interesting strategy shift if states decide to do it.
And I don't think they will. I meant to send this to you yesterday, actually, but the big dog, Dr. Fauci, was he talked to the Washington Post, and I wanted to read this quote that I made a note of. He was basically making the point that we shouldn't delay a second dose. There's too much risks. But I thought he said something interesting, quoting Dr. Fauci to the Washington Post. We're telling people 2 shots is what you should do, and then we say, "Oops, we changed our mind." I think that would be a messaging challenge, to say the least. And I just thought that was a perfect encapsulation of what you said the other day about how these people treat us like we're absolute toddlers who don't understand. Like, yeah, things change, right? Things, conditions on the ground change, and we change with them. Like we're adults here, right? We understand that. I think that the science messaging really does treat the American public like we're the dumbest, just incapable of understanding that things change. And it just reminded me of the thing with the masks back a year ago when they were saying, don't buy masks, don't wear masks because it may cause a run on, N95s and PPE. When you're just like it's just this assumption that we're completely incapable of like understanding nuance or like taking care of ourselves. And I don't even know what the answer is on the 1 dose or 2. Like I think there's risks on both sides.
No, just to interrupt you, this doctor that I was quoting isn't saying skip the second shot. He's saying don't hold the second shot.
Right.
Because he's saying, so if you're in New York, right, and you get 100,000 doses, right, give them out. Because there's for the people who need that second dose, you're gonna get that supply. It's gonna come.
Right.
You don't need to wait and hold that dose for them on the shelf. Put that in someone else's arm right away to speed this thing up. And don't worry, in 2 weeks from now, another big supply, more supply is going to come, and that's what you should be using for the second dose. So they're not saying change the strategy and don't give the second dose. They're saying stop stop holding 50% on the shelf, waiting, so that those people have that. Like you don't need to have your second shot accounted for anymore when you get your first, because we're going to get that supply is going to eventually come.
Right. By the way, shout out to Carrie, one of our listeners. She got her vaccine yesterday. If you email us and tell us your vaccine story, I will personally give you a virtual pat on the back and congratulate you. It makes me so happy when I hear about somebody getting vaccinated.
Me too.
Every single one of those people is one less person who has to worry about dying from this virus, right? That's how we got to think about this. And it's just every single person counts and matters.
Look, when my daughter's teachers got vaccinated, I am so happy that her teachers are fully vaccinated.
Yeah.
And slowly but surely, the parents in her class, one by one, they're getting vaccinated, and I'm like, oh, we're starting to form this kind of protective shell. It's starting. We just have to go a little quicker. Shall we do a little Cuomo. By the way, we didn't mention Trump, by the way, got vaccinated.
Oh, yeah.
Donald Trump and Melania got vaccinated in January while he was still president, and they didn't tell anybody. They didn't make it public.
That is, I meant to mention this because that really amazed me. When people talk about how Donald Trump is like this political genius, that is a classic example of why they're wrong. I mean, there's one thing that he could have actually pointed to as one of his successes, which is shepherding this amazing vaccine creation, right? And then he goes in, he doesn't even make a big production about actually getting the shot. He doesn't do it in public. Why not? It's crazy.
And think about how many people who really follow him would be encouraged. I think my prediction is that in 6 weeks, 2 months from now, we are going to have so much supply and not enough demand, because
Absolutely.
I really do believe that half of this country isn't going to get it. Okay. Let's do a little Andrew Cuomo news. A third young woman has accused New York Governor Andrew Cuomo of sexual harassment. Anna Rush told the New York Times that she met Cuomo at a wedding back in 2019 and that he immediately put his hand on the small of her back. And when she tried to move it, he said she seemed aggressive, and then put his hands on her cheeks and asked if he could kiss her. That moment was actually captured in cell phone photos taken by one of her friends and kind of corroborated in text message that she had sent at the time.
That picture, by the way, all over the New York tabloids this morning. Not a good look for our governor. You know, her case, Miss Rush's case, is a little bit different because she wasn't an employee of the state, and this incident did not happen at work. I'm not saying that it makes it like less of a problem. It's just like a little bit of nuance, right? Chris Cuomo, by the way, Andrew Cuomo's brother, he addressed the accusations against his brother for the first time on his show last night, explaining that he can't cover it for obvious reasons, but that CNN will continue to. By the way, I don't know if you noticed this. Bill de Blasio, our mayor, who is, you know, public enemy number one of Andrew Cuomo, he's put out, I believe now, 3 statements on this, just tearing into the governor. You know, I think he thinks that he's going to be governor one day. I got news for you, buddy.
No.
But it's back to what I said yesterday, right? Blood in the water in politics, you are toast, man. Everyone comes out of the woodwork.
All right, we're going to monitor for that, and we'll see if he says it. If Cuomo himself comes out and says anything, you know, perhaps he'll make a statement actually addressing the issues. On immigration, the Biden administration will let migrant families separated at the border during the Trump administration. He's going to give them the option of reuniting and settling in the United States. This is a major policy shift from the previous White House. The parents of about 500 children detained at the border have still not been found, even as a new White House task force says it's made headway in reuniting about 100 families.
And the number of unaccompanied minors arrested at the border has been climbing in recent months. I think it was up 50% in February, and these things usually tend to spike as the weather gets warmer. So I think there's some concern that another humanitarian crisis could be brewing this spring. I think the smugglers and the coyotes have, you know, they're sort of like they're business people, right? So they're marketing that there's been this change in administrations, and maybe maybe it may be easier to get you into the country, to come across the border. You know, President Biden has to be very careful here. Obviously, we cannot go back to that zero tolerance policy from the Trump years. That was just cruel and unusual, and I think pretty much everybody agrees that it was just horrific. You can't do that. But there has to be some sort of plan here. There has to be some sort of comprehensive immigration reform bill at some point. I don't know if that's something he's going to tackle maybe once the pandemic is over, but this is a potential political weak spot for him in the months to come.
9,000 is the number in February. 9,000 unaccompanied minors crossed into the United States last month. It's a lot. It's a lot. The stock market started March with a bang. The S&P notching its best day since last June. The overall market seeing its best day of the year so far. Tech stocks appear to have recovered from last week's steep declines. The rally is more broad, though. Investors reflect the growing optimism on vaccines, as well as the likelihood that the Senate will pass this new stimulus bill soon.
There's going to be some retail earnings today that could be interesting. Kohl's, Nordstrom, Target too, I think, and then Costco on Thursday. So a couple of things to watch there if you're interested in this. It's basic. We're going to get a good sense of how these companies, these big retail chains, fared during their first holiday season during the pandemic. How did their e-commerce arms do, and what do they expect in terms of forward guidance? Do these companies, these big box retailers like Target and Costco, do they see shoppers returning to stores as they get vaccinated, or is this sort of shift to e-commerce here to stay. I think that's one of these big trend lines that we're going to have to watch, right?
Right. No, what habits formed during the pandemic are going to stick with you post-pandemic? I, for one, have never shopped online for groceries. That was something I just never did prior. Now I do a once, sometimes twice a week online grocery list, and it's great.
You do the Prime thing?
I do. Yeah, I do Whole Foods, and then I do Stop and Shop. There's certain things I can't get at Whole Foods, so I'll do Whole Foods and Stop and Shop at least once a week, or it's once every 2 weeks. And you know what? It's wonderful. I have to say, I can't imagine going back to the grocery store.
I actually don't like it because for a number of reasons. First of all, there's something I feel sort of like kind of gross about it, like somebody else doing making somebody else do my shopping. But also, I just find that I like.
Make me feel bad, Carlo.
No. I didn't mean to, Jill. I didn't mean to. But it's more that the couple times that I have done it, they've just gotten things wrong and missed stuff, and I've just had a couple of bad experiences. So I'm still I still trek out to the grocery store every Sunday. But I understand the why you would do it.
Especially in the suburbs. In the city, I feel like it was great because you could just you wheel your stuff home. Here, you gotta load it up into the car. It's a whole to-do. So, anywho, I think it'll be interesting to hear what they have to say about what they're expecting going forward, and how the holiday season was. Meanwhile, CBS starting to heavily promote Oprah Winfrey's upcoming sit-down with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. That first promo teasing, quote, shocking things and a breaking point that led to the Duke and Duchess resigning from their royal duties. That interview was supposed to be an hour. CBS has expanded it to 2 hours Sunday night. Clearly, they think they've got some must-see TV on their hands.
I don't know if you saw that promo, but Meghan is wearing Princess Diana's bracelet. So maybe we'll hear a little about what that's all about. That interview, by the way, it's in the can, clearly. So it may be outdated by airtime on one important development with regard to the royal family. And we haven't really talked about this, but Prince Philip, the 99-year-old husband of Queen Elizabeth, they've been together for her entire monarchy. He's been in the hospital for the last 2 weeks, and he has now been transferred to another facility. That's obviously not good news. Buckingham Palace has been pretty quiet about his condition, but needless to say, he's 99 years old. So obviously, our best wishes to him, but that's something to keep an eye on in the coming weeks.
Did you see Prince Harry? We didn't talk about this. Did you see Prince Harry with James Corden?
I read about it, but I didn't watch. Was it good?
It was, I'd say it was 18 minutes or so, or 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And I had a smile ear to ear the whole time. It was just funny.
Really?
Yeah, and also so James Corden took him to the house in the Fresh Prince, the actual house, and kind of was trying to convince him to put in a bid as the prince, living where the Fresh Prince lived. It was just really funny. And then one nugget that was interesting. He said, James Corden asked him about The Crown and what he thought about it, and he said he didn't mind it. He's like, it is fiction, right? It's historical fiction, but they're not pretending that it's factual. And he's like, I can much more appreciate that than just lies in the press, in the British tabloids about his life, because they're saying that it's true when it's not. So he's like, The Crown. Point, he was like, The Crown. The gist of it is right, in terms of life as a royal, where you're kind of devoting yourself to something bigger than yourself. But he was like, what bothers him is more the tabloids in the UK that he said are pretending that they're giving you the truth, and it's not.
The Crown, by the way, has totally changed my mind on Prince Philip. I used to have no feelings about him whatsoever. And now because why would I? But now I'm rooting. I'm rooting for him to pull through, just because the guy who played him in the last 2 seasons of The Crown, God, that was such an incredible performance. I just loved it. I loved how he did it. Tobias something is this. The Crown makes you appreciate the royal family and just have such a deeper understanding, and as an American, I think too. We don't. I never knew what to. I was the same as you. I knew about Princess Diana, but I didn't really know what to think about the royal family. And just the pressure on the Queen, it's unbelievable. That woman has holding up the entire country and family on her back for 50 years now, longer. It is incredible. Okay, and finally, just speaking of must-see TV, there is this really interesting shift happening in live television, and no one knows whether it's just
Pandemic fatigue or something more ominous for the industry? The early ratings for the Golden Globes are eye-popping. Something in the neighborhood of 5.4 million people tuned into the show. That is down 60% from last year. Official numbers are going to be released today. The last big live TV event was the Super Bowl. Worst ratings in 15 years, even though it had one of the better matchups in recent history. Ratings for the NBA Finals were down 51%, NHL Finals down 61%, the U.S. Open down 49%.
Cable news also down. Fox News has been absolutely really hurt in the post-Trump era, which is that makes more sense, right? The product of there being no Donald Trump has hurt cable news ratings. That's a little bit different than what's happening with sports and with these other big live events. Media executives in this business have always said, like, news, sports, and live events like award shows. Those are the programming. That's the type of programming that's going to save the networks in the age of streaming. Big must-see live TV, right? And now that's being tested. Now it's turning out maybe not the case. It's one of these butterfly effects that we won't really understand for years, sort of like what you were just talking about with, like, the habits that change because of the pandemic. And the worrying thing for folks in our industry at large is that when people change these habits, it's very hard for them to change back. Right? If your habit is that you turn on, NBC on Tuesday nights to watch whatever's on, or you turn on MSNBC to watch Rachel Maddow, and you stop doing that, it's hard to go back to it. That being said, I do think that we're going to see a post-pandemic rebound. I think that a lot of what this is what I said the other day about the Golden Globes, which is like all of these live events, whether it's sports or the Globes or the Super Bowl, they all come with this constant reminder of how things are just different, right? There's no crowds. Everything's remote. Everything's on Zoom. And I think it's like people are just like, they're so fatigued at this point that it's better to just turn on Netflix, right? Watch some show that is total escapist, even if it's just kind of like garbage. Fold your laundry, watch it, go to bed. Like, it's just better. So I think that when the pandemic changes, when the pandemic starts to seed, we're going to see a little bit of a rebound. But it's really interesting if you're interested in this kind of stuff.
The Super Bowl was the thing that surprised me the most.
Yeah,
because I would have thought that would have been, I would have thought, especially with everyone home, I thought it was going to be record. I'm curious about March Madness. I, for one, am super psyched to have March Madness this year. And I'm curious about that. And
That'll be the next test.
I agree. I mean, like, I'm surprised at this trend, because you would think people would be psyched to have something live to watch, and sort of this sense of community. Like, the thing about watching something on streaming is that there is no sense of community. Even if somebody else that had watched the show, you're at different points. It's like, it's just not this communal type of thing. So I am curious to see. I'm curious to see about March Madness and what happens post-pandemic, but pretty fascinating. And, like, what do TV execs do? Right? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is our business. We should probably
I know we should probably figure it out, but it's and we could talk more, but it's like even Clubhouse, right? Like, so you listen to a podcast. We're going to record this podcast, and then anybody else whoever wants to listen to it can listen to it as soon as we upload it. In 20 minutes from now, they could do it later today. They could decide they want to listen to it next week. Whatever, right? You listen to it at your own, whenever is convenient for you. You could listen to it half now, half later. If Clubhouse, for example, is audio live, right? So you have that live element. You could jump in, you could ask questions, but it's like if you miss it, you miss it. I don't know. I'm curious. Like Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces, is that going to be the new? Are we going to be doing this podcast next year
the new live?
Right. And just that's it, right? I don't know. Really good questions that I guess above our pay grade, as they like to say. And we do have to leave it there. That is what you need to know for Tuesday, March 2nd.